It is January 11th, 2021, lesson 72 in A Course in Miracles student workbook. Holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation. So God's plan for salvation is allowing us to understand our nature, our true nature. We have our false sense of self when we are living in these lower vibrations, our invented sense of self when we have created an identity, and then our true sense of self when we basically burn everything off like a reincarnation. Now, why is this so difficult for us to go on this path? And it's because of our attachments. This is always going to be the most difficult part because we are identifying with this body, okay? And this body is basically just a borrowed thing, okay? Our life is just a borrowed thing. Our parents is just borrowed. All of us is just borrowed. Letting us understand that the self is separate from the body allows us to understand our true nature. Now, when we look at the ego, we're looking at the gain, fear, loss, the anxiety of his inevitable death, the separateness, the independence I, survival of uniqueness and existence, and of course we're looking at pain and suffering, okay? I like to think about this as the artificial intelligence in movies, okay? So the artificial intelligence becomes self-aware if in some way, somehow. Now, it's not a human, but it takes this hold of, you would call it the vehicle, right? This carcass, and the same as humans don't know what they're supposed to do because they're prone to error. Now, when we look at things just like that we're prone to error, that's what we are creating because we're identifying with that rather than identifying with the self, the thing that is giving life to this vehicle. The ego is the thinking mind, basically the Munchausen syndrome mother rather than the unconditional loving mother, because it doesn't think it's a problem, okay? And because we identify with it, we are identifying with the doer, the thinker, and the feeler, instead of understanding that we are the witness of the doer, the actions that we're doing, the thinking that we have, and then the feelings, okay? These are just all borrowed things for our own experience to experience ourselves. As we understand that we are not the culmination of some experiences that we have, that we are the witness of that, then we can understand that our preconceived notions are self-fulfilling prophecies, okay? It makes it very difficult for us to understand why we keep suffering, because what we're doing is just creating this internal loop. Once we understand that the mind is opening and closing every single time that it wants something or doesn't want something, that it cares about something, that it doesn't care about something, that it prefers something, that it doesn't prefer something, then we can take back our power, take back our consciousness. Because if we're putting our energy, our consciousness into things, wherever energy goes, wherever attention goes, energy flows. And that's what we're fixated on. We want to take caring to another level, because not caring is like apathetic, I don't want to do this. But if you are undisturbed, imperturbable, then you can kind of just witness things as it's unfolding. So you must want imperturbability more than you want approval, more than you want love, more than you want control, more than you want power, more than you want security, more than you want safety, survival, oneness, separateness. And you must choose to release these things that you've put inside of yourself, these preconceived notions or belief systems, and be imperturbable. You must choose to be imperturbable as you're seeing these unfold. And that is understanding that you are the problem. And once you take responsibility over that, then the grievances go away. Because the grievances are basically real or made up understandings that you are the victim, right? That you're blaming God, others, even your circumstances. And once we take that responsibility back, then we take back what freedom is for us, which is salvation, which is happiness, the ability to experience ourselves. You see individuals on Instagram, right, having these lavish lives, and all they're doing is experiencing themselves. You see the wealthy, right, the 1% trying to experience themselves. They don't want to have these, lower livings because they know that they are eternal and this is just a temporary thing. So the reason why you can't naturally merge with God is because you keep seeking, okay? And it's almost like you're focused on the flower, right? You see all this beautiful world and you're only fixated on one flower. Now this can be both, like the Osho, if you pluck a flower it dies and stuff like that. But you can also kind of convince yourself that focusing on the flower is giving it love. But again, you're not focused on the bigger picture. It stops you from seeing what the universe is actually trying to create, because it doesn't repeat itself, and you're letting the world kind of revolve around you without being aware of it. So most oftentimes the mind, right, the ego, is very active, is going to think about things, and it doesn't stop. Okay, it's going to be in a disturbed state, right? Drawing conclusions and stuff like that. And then of course we're going to be pulled by our senses, or five senses, because all the information that we're receiving is way too much. Okay, the world is trying to pull us, and we either are at the cause or at the effect when we're creating. The environment influences us, or we influence the environment. Okay, and then once we start getting into these positive feedback loops, then it just becomes serendipity, synchronicity. Okay, because that's what we're feeding out in the world, and as we see the world, so will we. So most oftentimes we'll try to meditate, and the problem with this, once again, is that we're identifying with the body, which means that just like going to the gym, if we keep doing, we see the gains. But that's not how it really works, because it's more of the byproduct of the perfect circumstances allowing us to access what's already inside us. Kind of like the Sioux poem, our self-realization of our true potential is within ourselves. So you can meditate to get to a point that you're more self-aware, which allows you to see things from a different light, and then allows you to access what you already are. It's almost like playing a video game, and just by playing the video game, you're already having these achievements, rather than something that you acquire from an acquisition. It's not something that you do, it's just by the grace of God rather than your own endeavors. So when we'll meditate, it's a doing, and you'll see people just meditate and they're like, oh yeah, right? And it's because they're trying to make the mind not disturbed. Now this is great because it gets you in that state, but the only thing is that that's the only way that they'll be able to function in the world in terms of that state. What we're trying to do is work on yourself not being distracted by the disturbed mind. That's where we're trying to get at, because as we learn about our experiences with samadhi, we'll see that samadhi can be with closed eyes, open eyes. You can't move in those states, right? And then you'll have open eyes as you're moving, and then we have the permanent seat of the self, the seat by the Father, or the seat of heaven, however you want to call it, right? Because now we are witnessing the movie unfold within ourselves, and we are in the audience. We're allowing it to unfold how it's supposed to be, and we're enjoying it for what it is. And this is just a temporary thing. And as we understand that our spirit is the thing that gives this life, then we understand that we are life. Okay? And the problem is that since we identify with our body, it makes it very difficult for us to understand that why we pain, what we're doing in life. Because we're so fixated and putting so much energy in this body that it makes it very difficult for us to even be aware of what life is trying to tell us. When we are holding these grievances, again, it's an attack on God's plan. And once we start to understand that the self is separate from the body, it's almost like the movie Avatar, right? The consciousness of that guy goes into this avatar. Then we can see that consciousness is always ever-present, omnipotent, and omniscient, all-knowing. And that's the separation of what this ego is. The ego is always trying to tell you that it knows better, and that it's always gonna be in your best interest. But really, it only does so much, right? Because the ego is what kept us safe, right? It's killed other people, it's been very selfish, whatever you want to call it. And now we're seeing that it's not allowing us to move to the next level of what we really are. Okay? So, allowing ourselves to see that we have to ask for some form of help, right? We've made ourselves helpless enough to ask for help. Sometimes we need help from others. Again, the meaning that we find through our actions, through our work, through the people that we meet, or the experiences that we have, or even our suffering, right, allows us to actually access the being that we are, self. And what we're asking is, what is salvation, right? To understand. And the more we understand, the more we allow ourselves to love. And we're more compassionate and kind to ourselves, which means that we're also kind and compassionate to others, because we always question why others don't see things the way that we do. And it's because we're prone to human error, right? Just like the ego, as artificial intelligence is saying that humans are prone to error, that it knows better than us. That's basically what we're doing. And once we understand the nature that if we live their life and that we have their level of consciousness, then we would do exactly what they did, then we allow ourselves to understand and love them for who they are. We accept more. Because, again, you're identifying with this body. And if you identify with this body, then you're identifying with error. We are not error. We are something beyond what that is, and allows us to be that perfect oneness and entity that we actually are. Okay? Most of these people, individuals, are seeking God in the wrong places. And that's kind of like your child, right? If you have a child that is an adolescent and they're getting in trouble, kind of like I did, right? You are still forgiving and loving towards them, even though they don't really understand. And they will eventually, right? Some way, somehow, because even with death, the ego separates and then our consciousness is still going, right? Energy is neither created nor destroyed. Then we become aware of like, oh, I've been holding on so much to this. And then you choose to rather come back or not. And most oftentimes people come back because of their desires, and that's why it's so difficult. But others come back because they want to teach. Okay, so I love you guys. I'm out, about, start about. Peace.